Hey guys, Prime here, and I want to tell you the story of the Canoe trip. Now, this is always spoken of as if it is the title to a great epic saga, and in a way it is, because in a lot of very pivotal ways it's part of who I am, and something that I've carried with me ever since as kind of proof that I could be the person that I want to be, in a way. So, the canoe trip. Once upon a time, there were some girls and their friend, Melina, and Melina's dad, who we came to understand was basically a 12-year-old in a grown-up's body. Well, one day, he invited us to all go canoeing down a river. And my sister Laura and I thought this was just the world's most awesome opportunity ever, and we were so psyched. And so all the kids from both families got into trucks and cars and whatnot, and we trundled up to the river that we were going to go canoeing down. And if I remember right, my sister Laura and Melina and I rode in the back bed of his old rickety pickup with the what are those called, the little camper cover thingy over it, and we ate like half of a bag of pretzels because we were kind of munchy, and there they were. And to this day I kind of hate pretzels because of that, because I was like, I don't like these, but I have to eat more. Anyways, it was funny. So we got there, and all the kids kind of piled out of the various cars. My parents had not come, because I think this was just their family was going, and they invited my sister and I along. I want to say that maybe my next sister down, Carrie, who would have been like maybe 10 at the most, or probably more like 8, was there, but I'm not sure. Anyway, they were a family of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They were a family of 5 girls, and we were a family of 5 girls. And we, lived right across the street from each other, kind of. It was a driveway, never mind. And so we all had kind of a best pal in the family. The girl that was my age was actually already kind of at the next stage of her life. She was either living with a guy or married at the time. I can't remember if she was actually married yet, but she was kind of in the wife and mom stage. And so my sister and I both hung out with Melina, who was my sister's age. Anyway, so David, which is her dad's name, said, well, maybe let's go and I'll take the little kids down first. But Laura and Melina and I were like, no, we want to go first. So he was like, all right, fine, I'll take the big kids first. So the 3 of us and he, got into a canoe and started down the river. And I cannot even tell you how stoked we were. We just thought this was going to be the world's coolest adventure. Now, this river was maybe 20 feet across, maybe 3 feet deep, maybe 4 at the really deep parts, but for the most part more like 2 feet deep. So not a great huge river, and I did not even consider to be nervous about going down this. I thought it was just kind of going to be tiddly-ump all the way down, and we'd be fine. We didn't have life jackets, but I didn't even think we would need them, because like I said, it wasn't all that deep. And also, about a year or so previously, my parents had checked out for us from the library a video about canoeing down rivers, how to read a river. And I remember at the time when we got this movie, we used to get all sorts of just interesting educational movies out of the library. We just absorbed them on just anything. And there are many that are sort of part of the family vernacular to this day. Anyway, so this How to Read a River movie, we watched it a bunch of times. And I remember at the time when we were watching it that I had the feeling that this was going to be important information and I needed to kind of really take it in and remember it. So I did. I paid a lot of attention. So I learned how to tell tell by the surface waves when there was a buried boulder, how to tell, which way kind of the river was going. Honestly now, I've forgotten a lot of it, which is too bad. But I had it at that point, and I felt like I had it. So I was completely confident about going down this river on this canoe. So we get in, and I honestly don't remember who started off in the front. David was always in the back, kind of being the steering person, and he let us girls take turns in the front. And we went along, and we were going to go down to some place that he said we're going to go down to the bridge, and we're going to meet the rest of the family there, and then go back up and take the second trip down with the other kids. And so I don't really know where we're going, but I don't care. I assume the adults know, and we're just like, we're going. So we're canoeing along, and it's just easy pie, great fun. We're having a blast. We're so excited. And we didn't really realize it at the time, but the way that we had been taught to paddle and steer a canoe was different from the way that David was doing it. He was doing it where his job at the back was mainly to be the rudder, and our job at the front was to pull the canoe along, instead of the way where, it's basically two people paddling, one on either side, and you do it that way. But he was kind of trailing his paddle in the water as a steering thing. And to do that, when you're doing that method, you paddle on the side you want to turn toward. If you're doing it the way that I knew how to do it at the time, you paddle on the side that you want to turn away from, if that makes any sense. So we were doing it, whichever way we were trying to turn, we would paddle on the side that we wanted to turn away from. But that would make us go towards it. Anyway, so we hadn't really quite figured out that there was this miscommunication going on, and we got to the first quote-unquote rapids. And it was kind of like, okay, whoa, here's where the river's getting a little more lumpy, and this was not a serious rapid, okay? It was just kind of some swells, and the river turned, and we were like really kind of, okay, it's a little serious now, but we were okay. And we made it through, and we were like, yeah, we're real river rafters now, we're so awesome. And so we kept going, and I think at that time, we switched whoever was in front or whatever. And we came to the second place where, because you can always hear the rapids coming. You can hear the sound of the river just kind of start roaring. So we know something's coming, and we see that there's kind of an S-bend in the river. And we still have this miscommunication about steering the canoe. So what happens is we end up, the river kind of washes, and it turns over to the right, and it washes up against the left bank. And there's a whole bunch of, I think there was a giant fallen tree there or something. And we end up, because of this miscommunication about steering, just plowing right into the side of this tree. And we all lean over to the right so that we don't get scraped off the canoe. But because we all lean over one direction, we of course capsize the canoe. So everybody ends up in the water. And my sister Laura ended up under the canoe. And I, grab onto the bottom of the canoe, and I'm feeling all, very Titanic and whatnot. I'm like, whoa, my gosh, we actually capsized. And I was kind of shocked. And, the river is freezing cold, and I couldn't find my sister. And I realize she's under the canoe, and we go, oh my gosh, and we get her out. And we're still kind of, flowing down this fast-flowing river, but it's not terribly deep. And what happened to Laura was that her legs were still trailing under the canoe when it went over some underwater rocks. And so the canoe, with the weight of all of us, just scraped her between the canoe and these rocks and just mangled the crap out of her. And she had bruises all over her entire body for months after that, and she came up with funny names for them, like her purple pelvis and her rats. I can't remember, but they were so funny. She's such a funny person. And she got out pens, ballpoint pens, and she decorated the bruises and made them into quote-unquote hideous bugs. So these, multicolored purple, green, and yellow bruises have been given form and legs and things so that they look like these iridescent bugs. Anyway, so I lost my train of thought. Anyway, so we all get back in the canoe, and I'm really concerned about hypothermia. And so everybody gets in, and we're like, all right, we're going to get to the bridge as quickly as possible and get everybody dry. And we know that the only thing we can do is to just paddle as quickly as we can and get there. But we don't really know how far it is. And so we're going along, and we start to hear the river roar again. And I'm like, oh no. We figured out steering at that point, but still. And the river gets all smooth and flat, and I'm like, oh no, I remember this means waterfall, this is bad. And we see kind of a line of rocks going out from each shore into the middle. And I'm like, this is bad, I don't want to go through this. And David is like, oh, come on, we'll just go through the rock in the middle, we'll be fine. I'm like, no, I really don't want to do it. And so I start pulling us with all my might, because I was in the front. I start pulling us with all my might in towards the left shore. I'm like, no, I don't care what you say. We're not going through there. And we are getting closer and closer, and we realize that it is indeed a waterfall. And by that point, we're just, trying to get to shore. And we just barely, we're bumping up the front of the canoe against these rocks at the edge of the waterfall. And we managed to grab branches and try not to, capsize the canoe again. We managed to grab it and stop the canoe just barely in time. And I was so mad at David. It's like, you were going to have us go over that waterfall. Now, this wasn't, a giant waterfall. It was only 5 feet tall, but it was all the water of the river pouring through this tiny narrow channel onto giant boulders below. And we would have at least busted the canoe, which would have been horrible with everybody with hypothermia and no way to really walk along the river because it was really overgrown with trees. And it just would have been so bad. And I was really ticked off at David by then. And at that point, I realized that he's never been down this river before, but was perfectly willing to take us kids, even the little kids, down it, sight unseen. And that he's the kind of guy who's like, oh yeah, let's just go through the middle, da-da-da. And so I lose absolutely every shred of confidence in him. And to this day, I'm still really kind of mad at him for doing that. And I need to remember that it was a really good experience and not just be mad. But anyway, so we get out and we portage around the waterfall. And I'm like, Laura and Melina, you guys are going to carry it because you need to do some work and warm up. And I was just being really kind of bossy. But I was really, really worried about my sister. And so I'm trying to get her warm. And so we go along and we get back in the river because that's all we can do. And we go along. And we come to the bridge. And nobody is there. And it's not that we come to the bridge and stop and look around. It's that we come to the bridge and David kind of looks and he's like, oh, they're not here. They must have gone to the next one. And so we don't even pause. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, how much further is it? And he's like, I think it's about 3 miles. And I'm like, I hate you. I didn't say that, but I was so mad. Anyway, so at this point, I am just determined that we are going to chug along as fast as we possibly can. Because everybody's just shivering in there. And I can't remember why I didn't have them paddle and warm up, but I think part of it was just being a control freak, and I wanted to be, I didn't trust David, so I wanted to be in charge of at least a little bit of steering. Anyway, and I just wanted to get them home. So we're going along, and we come to this place where there are a lot of giant boulders scattered along the river, and a lot of them are just kind of really low and buried, but they're there. And you have to understand that I am horrible at keeping right and left straight vocally, like I know them, but translating that side to the correct word in my brain to my mouth just doesn't work very well. But I was really grateful because we get to this place with all the boulders where you have got to steer, and you've got to steer accurately and rapidly. And, okay, that was kind of a cheesy pun. Did not mean to do that. Anyway, quickly. You have to steer quickly. Between these boulders. And I was in the front, so I have to kind of watch and remember all the river reading I've learned and say, okay, left. Okay, hard right. No. And so we thread our way between all of these boulders, and we get to a place where I can see that there's one boulder barely sticking out of the water, but another one right beside it. And David didn't see that. So I'm like, no, more right. But he didn't keep steering us right, so we ended up going right between these two boulders. And we kind of scrape along, and we're just kind of, and we get hung up, and we start kind of tilting forward to get, like a seesaw. And I hear David in the back saying, we're swamping, which is what he said right as we were capsizing. So I'm like, oh no! But we managed to just peel ourselves out from between these rocks and keep going. And I was like, we finally made it to the second bridge. Now you have to understand, these bridges are just kind of ancient, busted, wooden railroad thingies that I don't even think are real working bridges anymore. Anyway, we get to the last one, and we pull in, and there's the family. And I'm like, you young kids are not going down the river. It was extraordinarily dangerous. And we almost went over a waterfall, and there were these big rocks. And get my sister warm! And it was really, funny. And it was one of those great adventures that, make a great story afterwards. And this is frankly actually, whenever anybody plays Two Truths and One Lie, I always throw in the canoe trip as a truth, because it sounds so much like a lie. Yeah, this one time I went canoeing down a river and we almost went over a waterfall and died. But anyway, the thing that it made it so meaningful to me was that when we were in this situation where I didn't feel like we had a genuine adult with us, and where we were kind of in danger, I felt like I was able to kind of pull up my socks and be a good leader. And I know I was bossy, and I worry that my sister thinks I'm a snob for feeling this way, but it really is something that I hold on to as kind of proof that I can do it. And so yeah, I'm glad we made it. I'm glad we had the experience, because it really was awesome. It was not perfect, and my sister had bruises for many, many weeks afterwards, but nobody was permanently damaged, and we all got to feel just a lot tougher in ourselves, I think, for going through that. And yeah, that's the canoe story. And this is Prime.